I've muted. Okay. I'm going to call the Environmental Stewardship Committee meeting to order at, I think it's 12:33 p.m. Good afternoon and welcome to the October 10th, 2023 meeting of the Mecklenburg County Environmental Stewardship Committee. I am Commissioner Elaine Powell and I serve as the chair. We are committed to the important work of maintaining, protecting, and enhancing our environment so that all residents will thrive. A virtual attendance option is offered as an alternate mode of accessibility to our meeting today. We welcome the public who have been provided a call-in number to access the meeting. Those attending virtually are asked to display your full name on Zoom as the attendance is recorded for the minutes. Additionally, virtual attendees are asked to remain muted and please use the chat box to submit any comments to be read aloud to the committee. The agenda, meeting minutes, and presentations for today were sent out to those already on the distribution list. If anyone did not receive these and would like electronic copies of any presentation materials provided today, please make your request via email to Erin Stanforth. Her email address is Erin, E-R-I-N Stanforth, S-T-A-N-F-O-R-T-H @mecnc.gov. We will begin today's meeting by having each board member identify him or herself so that the record will reflect who is present and participating in the meeting. I am Mecklenburg County Commissioner Elaine Powell. I represent the people of District 1 and serve as Vice Chair of the Board and Chair of Environmental Stewardship Committee. Next, I will ask my colleagues to make their introductions as I call out their districts. District 4, Commissioner Jarrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mark Jarrell, District 4.
District 6, Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Rodriguez McDowell, elected by the people of District 6.
Thank you. Commissioner Altman is running a few minutes behind and she will join us when she gets here. For the record, we have 3 commissioners present for the meeting, therefore we have a quorum. I will now ask Erin Stanforth to assist with other introductions for people who are joining us today.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. With us virtually, we have Lauren Hendrickson with Wake County, Shauna Caldwell, Ebenezer Jarlaputi, Krista Rogers, Chris Matthews, Abby Wyatt, Leslie Rhodes, Amanda Strouderman, Juliana Hawley, Chloe Barbu, Jacqueline McNeil, and Jeff Smithberger. My name is Erin Stanforth. I'm the Sustainability and Resiliency Manager.
I'm Kathleen Reed, Sustainability and Resiliency Consultant.
Good afternoon, Leslie Johnson, Deputy County Manager.
Rusty Rozelle, Water Quality Program Manager with County Stormwater Services.
And please join us at the table. Rusty, I know you don't like all this attention, but you can please join us at the table.
And
Thank you.
Don Ciccarelli, the County Director of Stormwater Services.
Thank you. Anyone else? So before we move forward, has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? I will entertain a motion to approve the September 12th, 2023 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell, seconded by Commissioner Jarrell. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And it's 3 of us vote yes, so it passes. And before we begin our first presentation, I just want to ask that any presenter, please do not use any acronyms. Try so hard not to use acronyms because every meeting that I'm in, there's some confusion because we don't know every acronym. So please keep that in mind. And let me ask you, is Teresa here? Okay, so I will now recognize Lauren. And can you tell me Lauren's last name? Hendrickson. So I will now recognize Lauren Hendrickson of Wake County. Oh, here it is. He is the Wake County Farmland Preservation Coordinator and will discuss the Wake County Farmland Preservation Program. And I saw part of this program when we were at the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and it was so outstanding. And the work is so important and so good that I asked you to invite them to give us a presentation so that we could see it about how we can do better on protecting and preserving. Thank you. So Aaron, if you can help.
Sure. Lauren, can you come off mute?
Yep, I'm ready. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Sure can.
All right. I guess so you'll just advance the slides for me there. Okay, all right. So I guess I should say welcome everyone. Thank you for having me. So my name is Lauren Hendrickson. I'm the Farmland Preservation Coordinator for Wake County Soil and Water. The Wake County Soil and Water, we're a county department, standalone county department. We're very intertwined in county operations and county management. So I guess what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is the background of why we decided to create the Farmland Preservation Program and what that program really looks like. So why do we do it? What do we do? And then how's it going since we did that? And where do we plan to go in the future? So it's kind of what I want to try and cover here today, kind of our mileposts. So starting with a little background, so for years and years, development in Wake County is not a new thing. And I know folks in Mecklenburg are probably uniquely positioned as as well as we do what a rapidly growing county looks like, better than anyone else in the state. I think you all know. So these are some numbers from a Wake County planning effort that was conducted in 2020, 2021. And this was the Plan Wake was the acronym. And they set out some projections. So projections for new growth over the next decade. County is expected to add another 250,000 residents. That's on pace with what was added in the prior decade. And with that comes land conversion, most often in the form of agricultural land to residential or commercial. And with that projection, they're looking at roughly 28,000 acres of development over the next kind of 20 to 30 years. So one of the big responses they got out of this planning effort from citizens in the county or residents in the county was really a strong need to protect open space, to protect green areas, whether that be parks, nature preserves, farms. It was the most requested and most sought after thing in this Plan Wake response from the residents of the county. And as a result of that, the planning department set aside a goal to try and protect 30% of the county's land. And they have done quite a bit of that through parks and recreation and open space, and in conjunction with municipalities in the county. But one of the big lacking areas was agricultural protection. So that was kind of a big need that was addressed. Next slide, please. In conjunction with Wake County planning, there was also, I believe it was the 2020 report from the American Farmland Trust. So in that report, which is conducted by the American Farmland Trust, which is a national nonprofit who basically supports agricultural operations and preservation of agriculture across the country. In their 2040 Farms Under Threat report, they listed Wake County and the whole state of North Carolina as two kind of hot button areas for farmland loss. So in that report, North Carolina was the second highest state for projected farmland loss, and Wake County was one of the, I think it was 32nd out of the top 50 counties in the country for projected farmland loss, which isn't really surprising when you consider, as the number states there, we're adding 56 new residents a day. And those are current numbers as of last week from planning. And with that, so we still have roughly 91,000 acres of agricultural land, down quite a bit from where we were 10 years ago. As we can see, we've lost 23,000 acres there. So concerning for our livelihoods and kind of the state of the county. Next slide, please. So these are some numbers from that American Farmland Trust report. And in the report, it's a very detailed report. I can happy to share it with anyone if you haven't seen it and you're interested in it. But they go through growth scenarios for each county listed. And they have those three growth scenarios, as you can see here, are business as usual, better built cities, and runaway sprawl. They're kind of as you would expect based on the titles. So, but what I kind of want to highlight are the big differences between the better built cities approach and the runaway sprawl. Again, these are numbers for Wake County. So using higher density urban area development and protection of rural lands, we're still looking at a conversion of roughly 32,000 acres of ag land in Wake County in 2040. Business as usual, we're talking 47,000, and obviously quite high again with 56 or 57,000 acres roughly for the runaway sprawl approach. So these are very kind of alarming numbers and alarming trends. So kind of makes you think, well, what should we do to try and curb this? Is this something we need to worry about? And in Wake County, we were very much concerned about that and wanted to prioritize the protection of farmland. But next was kind of about what to do, how to do that. So next slide, please. So just a brief history of farmland preservation in the county, because it is, for the most part, brief. Some high points I want to list here. So in 2002, Wake County adopted its first voluntary agricultural district ordinance. I know you mentioned also try and stay away from acronyms as best I can, but I might say VAD once or twice on accident, but just know the VAD is the Voluntary Agricultural District. That's a program we've had for over 20 years. And that was a big win to get that in 2002, sorry. But it was pretty strict. It was tough to get into, and the program didn't have a lot of teeth, to be frank. And so it had been updated a few times over the years. But in 2021, with state statute changes, we had a need to revise the ordinance to remain in compliance. Basically, it changed the structure of how advisory boards met and how they were housed within the county. And so this gave us kind of the perfect opportunity to not just not just modify the ordinance to remain compliant, but to completely rewrite the book, add a more robust program to address these really dire needs that we have in Wake County for farmland protection. And that's how we got the farmland preservation program. So next slide. These are our graphics. So the program was really a combination of a lot of different stakeholders, both on the county side, out of county partners, such as our nonprofit land conservancy that we work with a lot here, Triangle Land Conservancy. And we really got the county involved. So we had communications help us with graphics and outreach. We had our IT team help us develop a whole new database and online application system. We work with county manager's office to secure funding to have people to staff this position. So it was really a big collective effort. Next slide. And again, our main goal here is protecting the best farmland in the county for the production of food and crops into the future. I think we saw this a lot during the pandemic with food security concerns. Those have not gone away. And so the ability to have local food is a really big important factor. The county's invested a lot of money in local foods as well, so the program fit with that. And also just to ensure the environmental and economic health of agriculture into the future as an industry, and then also just maintaining the environment within the county. So next slide. I touched on some of these as well. So just some of the big high points here with the farmland preservation program. So as I mentioned, we had the previous program we had was called the Voluntary Agricultural District, VAD. With that program, it's voluntary, and it was a program that a landowner could withdraw themselves from as they wished without really any consequences. There's no tie to it. So we wanted preservation options that had a bit more staying power and had a firm time commitment for non-development and farmland protection. So we added the Enhanced Voluntary Agricultural District. These are both examples of state programs. The State Department of Agriculture has created and kind of crafted a model for different counties, for counties across the state to adopt and follow. And that's what we did here. So we have the voluntary ag district, the enhanced voluntary ag district, and then the third option we added was conservation easements. And this is really our big focus, because conservation easements for us here in Wake County means permanent protection. We're working with landowners to keep farmland as it is in perpetuity. So with those new programs, we had a lot of needs as far as management, and what we did was we created a new database to house applications. We have a 20-year backlog of applications that were all paper, really messy binders. So it's been a task to organize that and put it all in an easily kind of understood online system. And then we also have the ability for folks to apply, or landowners to apply online instead of just paper form. We had our communications team, as I mentioned, design a whole new suite of graphics, new signs, new kind of marketing materials to help rebrand the program. Because previously we just had signs that said, Wake County Voluntary Agricultural District. A lot of people don't know what that means, and I think that's reasonable. It doesn't. If you're not within the sphere, how do you know what that means? It's just a term. It's jargon in a way. So we really wanted to hit home the message, which was farmland preservation, and that is central to every graphic and everything that we really talk about as well. So, and another big thing was the additional funding and resources. So my position that I'm in was created out of this new program and the request made to county management. And so I started September of last year. So I've just been here for a little over a year now in this position, when it didn't exist before. So I'm really, really fortunate to be here for that. But I think the most important part is that last bullet, which is the county commitment and county commissioner commitment to conservation by way of prioritizing funding for conservation easements. And I'll get into that on the next slide. So what the commissioners decided to do, and very fortunate for us, is to allocate the annual rollback tax revenue to be used for funding permanent conservation easements. So explain that a little more. So rollback tax, some folks also call it rollover. What it means is it's the money that comes from agricultural land that is in the state's present use value program. When that land comes out of present use value, there are back taxes that are owed because they're paying a deferred tax rate, being in working agriculture. That money, the kind of land coming out of ag each year, is called rollback. So that's what that is. That's what that term means. And in a way, what we saw it symbolizing was a funding source to protect agriculture, coming from kind of the removal of agriculture on the front end. We're trying to protect it on the back end. And just for reference as well, so for tax year 2022, the rollback tax collected by Wake County was around $4.2 million. And so in March of this year, the county commissioners allocated us to have that money to use for match and funding conservation easements, which was such a big deal, such a win. And we hope to use that for future projects as match, because most often with easements, we'll be applying to state funding or federal funding, and we can use this as match to make our applications more successful. All right, so next slide. Okay, so I know I touched on the programs briefly, just provide a little more detail about them here. So voluntary agricultural districts. So Wake County VAD, as I mentioned, it's been around for a while, been around for over 20 years. What it is, it's a 10-year agreement that a landowner makes with us in our office and with the county, where they promise and pledge to maintain agricultural activity. However, they're able to remove themselves from that agreement with 30 days written notice to our agricultural advisory board. So it's really been about promoting the agricultural community and letting folks know, letting your neighbors know that you're an active working farm and you plan to stay that way for the long term. Next slide. And it does provide, the voluntary ag district program does provide some incentives for landowners. So, like I said, there's public recognition, education. There's also some increased protection from nuisance suits. And one of the new components of to be compliant with state statute, one of the new rulings was that there has to be a record notice. So now anyone who is in the voluntary agricultural district program is entered into a separate GIS layer that the county houses. So you can provide a half-mile notice to anyone around that parcel that there's a working farm nearby, and you might expect noises, smells, and the sites of agricultural activity around. So it serves to help, make sure the neighbors know that you're there and you plan to stay there. So next slide. So the enhanced voluntary agricultural district builds upon the VAD, the voluntary ag district, and it parallels it in a lot of ways. But the main difference here is that 10-year agreement that you're making is irrevocable, and it's noted on the deed. So it's really a term easement in a way, and landowners have the option to renew for 3 years after that initial sign-up period of 10 years. It can, in addition to VAD, provide some of the protections for utilities. What I always tell folks, it doesn't mean that you can't have, the part of the land condemned for utility easement, but it does help in the process. And what it also really does is important, is it gives you the opportunity to have a public hearing. So any condemnation of property that's in the VAD or the EVAD here will come with a public hearing. So it gives the landowner the opportunity to state their point and maybe have other options considered because they've shown their interest in agriculture. Next slide. Just two other little points with the enhanced program. So one, it's kind of a big deal for some farmers. They can receive up to 25% of gross sales from non-farm products. So this is like for folks that have a farm stand, they can sell more non-farm products and still retain their bona fide farm status, which is a very important thing for them. They're also eligible for a greater rate of cost share for any conservation work that our office does with them. So those are 2 points that matter for some folks. But so these two programs, basically two different term programs, 10-year commitments. The EVAD, the Enhanced Voluntary Agricultural District, has a firm 10-year commitment on the deed, not the landowner, so it stays regardless of if the land is sold. But our last option, which you can go ahead and change the next slide, is our conservation easement program. And this is the one we're kind of really excited about and where I've focused a lot of my effort because it comes with permanent protection. So working on an easement is locking up that land and make sure it'll stay as a farm in perpetuity. Next slide. So as I mentioned, permanent protection and can receive funding. So with the voluntary ag district and enhanced voluntary ag district, there's voluntary programs a landowner enters into and there's no payment. However, with conservation easements, there's a payment component for landowners. So obviously you can also have a donated conservation easement. A landowner does not have to accept any funding. But it's often an unpopular proposition if you're looking to try and protect farmland, just to ask people to voluntarily place an easement on that land, ensuring they can never change its use and not to, receive any compensation for that. So a big really success factor, I guess you could say, for conservation easements is being able to provide some funding to give the landowner to repay them for what they're giving up by signing up for the easement. Next slide. And just a little bit here logistically how that's managed. So we have our agricultural advisory board, which is it's a Wake County advisory board. It's got 7 members on it, and they oversee all farmland preservation activities within the county. So that's voluntary ag district, enhanced voluntary ag district, and easements. And in my position, serve as staff to that board. So I will bring applications to the board for their approval, and they have quarterly meetings. And for easements, it's a little bit different because I'm working with a landowner to apply for funding for both federal and state grants, and then if we have successful applications with those programs, we will look to match them with county funding. So we will do a 1-to-1 match with our rollback money that we have now to help basically to help bolster that that payment for the landowner. So we're getting as close as possible to compensating them for the value of that easement. And then we also have the ability to hold the easements after they are recorded. So our office holds a few, or really I should say the Soil and Water District, which is a separate body of state government, holds a few easements, and we have the ability to do that. And we are definitely going to do that in the future in conjunction with our nonprofit partners, Triangle Land Conservancy. Next slide. As I mentioned, just a little snippet about our new online system. So we're really happy with the work. As I mentioned, it was a collaborative effort from the county's standpoint. We had a whole new updated web page, new application portal, a new database. And I think this is really key to allowing me in my position to manage all of the different facets. So all 3 different programs, the existing VAD enrollment that we've had. And while I didn't play much of a part in making it, we were collaboratively working on what we needed. And I think this is an essential part of having a successful program, is having a place to house all this information that's standalone and basically tailor-made to help manage properties in the future. Next slide. And signs. So signs traditionally have been the most visual display of the program. You can ride around in the county and see the signs posted up at farms. In the past, they just said they were a smaller sign, mostly white with a green font that said, "Welcome to another beautiful Wake County Voluntary Agricultural District," which is great. But again, we get back to that. Well, what's that mean? What's that sign for? So these new signs are bigger, brighter, and they state their purpose very clearly in the center: farmland preservation. We're really happy with them. And we have a unique sign, as you can see, for each of our 3 programs. And I'm really happy, and I know they already work, because I had one of our first new VAD landowners to get this new sign, put it up on his property. And then I think probably 2 weeks after I know he put it up, I had a call from a member of the public, another farmer that I'd never known, never met. And he saw his neighbor's sign and said, "I want to do that." And that's now led to a conservation easement application. So really, to me, the signs are a big win, and they're what the public sees most. I mean, I see the farmers might see it and understand it differently, but it helps just kind of general public education of what we're trying to do here. Next slide. Let's see, early success. So as I mentioned, this program is very new. So we launched in February of this year. That's when we formally launched everything: the website and application portal and the new marketing materials, the branding. Since then, we've had 2 agricultural advisory board meetings at which we have approved an additional 628 acres for the voluntary agricultural district program, bringing that total to almost 12,000 acres. Again, that's over the past 20 years for that enrollment. We also had our first enhanced voluntary agricultural district approved at 87 acres. And we just end of August, approved funding for our first conservation easement that we've helped out with. So a really big win for us. It was actually a project that was brought to us by Triangle Land Conservancy. They had state funding and federal funding secured for a farm that they were putting an easement on, but they really needed more money to provide an adequate match, and they really wanted to get closer to the easement value for this landowner. And so we were able to test out our new option here, rollback money, and use that there to help close this easement. So that was a big win. I think there's a little more on this slide. Oh yeah, perfect. And we should by the end of the year have 1 more easement wrapped up. This one will be a full donation, where we're doing a half landowner donation, half Wake County rollback tax money. And my big workload now is I'm currently working with 7 different farmers, landowners in the county who are applying to, I'm submitting applications for funding for the state and federal programs, which we then hope to match with our county funding here. So keeping busy. We've had a great deal of interest in the conservation easements, which I know is something we have been told before is, oh, that sounds like a lot to give up. You're giving up the ability to subdivide or, do whatever you want with your land. And that's really not the case. And what I find when I get out and talk to people is they want to stay farming. And so when I tell them, no, you're actually just going to keep doing everything you are still doing. The only thing you can't do is subdivide the land. That helps to sell it a little bit, and they're going to get paid to compensate for that. So it's really a popular program. We've been very happy with the success it's brought so far. So, next slide. So I guess just in summary here, this program really came out of, it comes from some scary news. It comes from the fact that we are losing farmland rapidly. We have been for a very long time. It's not a new issue. Ideally, it would have really been a program that could have been created earlier, but we are where we are, and we're in a moment now that we could capitalize on it, thankfully. So our main goal is protect as much as we can while we still have it. And it really was a collaborative effort between the district board, our Wake County Agricultural Advisory Board, county commissioners, county manager's office, and then numerous county departments, as well as outside, as I mentioned, Triangle Land Conservancy as well. A really big collaborative effort to show that farmland preservation matters in Wake County, and we need to act. And our main missions for the future are to increase enrollment in voluntary agricultural district, the enhanced voluntary agricultural district, and conservation easements as well. So moving forward, the conservation easement process is slow, can take years per project sometimes to wrap them up, but we've got a lot of interest, and we hope we have the money to fund them for the future. So our main goal is protect as much land as we can while we still can. So I think that is the last slide. Yeah, but so thank you, but I'll have you take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you very much. And I just want to tell you that when I was in your presentation at the conference, it was my favorite one because it was much longer than this. But everybody on the team, even the Lands Conservancy, we're so excited and so enthusiastic about the 112-acre conservation easement that there was a whole special section on that. And I could feel they worked for it for 15 years. So I could feel the relief of all of the efforts, and it was born out of protecting natural resources. And, it's not just farmland, it's much more than that. But before I go to questions, I want to thank you again, Lauren. Your work is super important, and all the people that on the team that made it happen. Eventually, like one of the things that we'll cover is where are we now? Where are we now? When they say Wake County has a goal to protect 30%. Last numbers I heard, Mecklenburg County, our parks and recreation and nature preserves isn't even 10%. And so the burdens of development are much greater on us with a very similar population to Wake County. And how do we respond to that so that we protect our natural resources and also a regional priority from Central Lina to protect our farmland. And I think that'll be a future topic. Where are we now? Because I'm pretty sure it's still less than 10%. And so who would like to go first?
Okay,
Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell?
thank you. I hesitated to go first because I don't want my question to sound dumb.
Your microphone.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that really detailed presentation. And appreciate your work. I was wondering on slide 11, can you just help me a little bit with the annual rollback tax revenue? Like, can you just explain that a little bit more?
Yes, I can. I think it's, a little. There we go. Yeah. So the annual rollback tax. So what it really comes from is the state present use value program. So present use value exists to basically provide a lower tax threshold for working farms. And in that program, say theoretical numbers here, say you've got a 50-acre farm, your assessed value is $1 million for that farm, which means then you would pay say if you're just non-agricultural use, you would pay the same rate as, I think in Wake County, at least planning wise, it's they categorize it as greater than 10 acres with or without a house. And so that's a much higher property tax rate than if you're in the present use value program. So present use value, what it does is it only taxes you on your use value for the land. So what you're producing, the crops that you're producing on the land in a given year. And all the rest of that tax burden is what they call deferred. So, and that is, so you have to get into the program. You have to work with your county tax office and the State Department of Agriculture to get in the program. And once you're in it, you have to keep that status. But if you're ever coming out of agriculture and coming out of present use value, when you do so, that deferred tax money that you haven't been paying because you're a working farm is due. In Wake County, it's due within 30 days. I don't know how every county does it, but that's how we do it here. The tax office does it here. You have to pay what we call those back taxes within 30 days of the land use change from agriculture to another use, whatever that use may be. So it's a really big deal. And that money has always gone into the separate fund, which we just called the rollback or rollover tax fund, which traditionally just went to the county's general fund for budgetary speaking. And that money is what we are now have been allocated by the county commissioners to help fund future conservation easements. Does that help clear it up a little bit?
Yes, it does, but it brings up another question because, it's just a little bit fuzzy. So if I convert my land away from farming, I'm going to owe taxes. And that amount of tax, because it's been deferred while I've been using the land for farming. Is that like every year, or like let's say I've always used my land for farming, so my taxes have been deferred all that time? Is that?
No, good question. It's 3 years. So it's 3 years of back taxes, deferred taxes. But yeah, it's just a 3-year placeholder.
Okay, so that means that if I'm a generational farmer and, like I've had this farm for generations, how is the tax working, for more than 3 years? Like I don't get how they're taxed if they're a generational farmer.
So the program doesn't, let me start by just saying also, I'm not a tax expert, and I don't want to trip you up either. So I'm going to tell you what I understand of it. Hopefully I don't muddy it up anymore, but whether you're a new farmer or you've had a farm for 200 years, that doesn't get you into the present use value program. You have to apply for it, and you have to be given that status both at county level and state level to show that you're a working farm. And there's all kinds of state statute written about that. There's this bona fide farm status, which gives you the ability to have present use value. Present use value is just the taxation program for the land. But just because you're a bicentennial farm doesn't mean you have present use value. You have to go out and get that. And it's just that and you can stay in that for as long as you care to keep farming. It's just about maintaining agriculture on that land. But it's when the land use changes that the present use value has to go away. So you decide to sell your farm for development, that's when that deferred tax becomes due. And that's when that tax would get collected by the county.
Okay. And then that money is used for a different farm, no longer for you. Like you're putting it into a fund that other farmers are going to be able to use that.
Right. Well, I mean, yes, essentially. I mean,
program.
It's not like you're choosing it. I mean, the Wake County Tax Office just collects it and it goes into this pot essentially.
Right.
But now that pot has been allocated just to us for agricultural conservation easements. And before it just went to the general fund. But now the money collected for the whole tax year, whichever given tax year, will be allocated to us so that we can, when we have valid and projects to bring forward for conservation easement, we can use that money to help compensate the landowner for that easement. Because the easement really is basically, it's like a real estate transaction. You're removing or you're selling the development rights or the right to subdivide the land. So it has to stay in its current agricultural use forever. And that's what we are paying a landowner for what they're willing to do.
Okay, thank you. That does help a lot. And just lastly, the state legislature, I know like we're not allowed to do anything unless they let us do it. So this is something that you guys have pushed for this legislation, or it was already there and you just figured out how to utilize it better, or?
Just the rollback specifically, do you mean?
Yeah.
So no, this is not a state legislature thing. This is just solely county. So, and I don't know that every county has what they would call a rollback fund. I would assume so, but I don't know how it is everywhere. But this is something that has been talked about for years, but there's not like a state parameter for it or anything written into statute that I'm aware of saying that this is something that has to be done or anything like that. I mean, it was really a lot of effort on the ground by folks in Wake County looking to protect farmland, and they saw this as a great basic revenue stream to help make that happen. But no, this is something that we've adopted, and I know since we've done it, other counties have taken it up as well. I know our neighbors in Johnson County have done the same thing. I think they didn't give the full rollback tax amount to their soil and water office for easements, but I think they gave them 30% or 50%. Don't quote me on the percentage, but they gave them something. And I know other counties are looking at it as well, because I think it just fits because it's a tax revenue stream that comes from agriculture. So being able to protect agriculture with that money just seemed like a good fit.
Wow, thank you so much. It's really interesting.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jarrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lauren, thank you for the presentation. I just have two areas that I'd like to cover. Your first one is, and I'll ask both of these questions and then let you go. You made a passing reference early in the presentation to local foods. Wondering if you could drill down a little bit more on that. Is there some level of distribution locally, or what does that look like, I guess, as far as the partnership there? The second thing is with respect to the advisory board. Can you give us a sense of, it seems like this advisory board may have a little broader responsibility and scope of authority. Is that correct? Relative to, the way normal advisory boards work. It seemed like you made a reference to them making some level of approvals, not necessarily recommendations to the board.
Yeah, great questions. I'll start with the local foods. So I guess start with a caveat. So local foods is a big initiative in Wake County, and our cooperative extension department has done a lot with local foods. And there was just recently a countywide food security plan that was a big undertaking to produce. And so it was basically another supporting factor for farmland preservation was this strong emphasis on local foods. And while say we're not prioritized, like I don't want to say this. The local foods is important, and cooperative extension has done a lot of work. And basically our goal of farmland preservation really fits with that local foods initiative. And to that point, the project that I mentioned at the end, the 112 acre easement, actually has a group of refugee farmers who are from Burma, and they have basically, they're refugees here in the US, and they were looking for a place to grow their native produce. And they found a willing landowner who gave them his land to farm. And they have a community garden. They have a food stand, a produce stand they sell once a week, open to the public. And so this easement went directly, or basically paying this easement went directly to supporting this effort of local food in the county. You can buy it right there. But I guess specifically, we're kind of working and leaning on cooperative extension for the real nuts and bolts of food security plan. But it definitely fits, because I mean, if you don't have the land to grow the food on, you don't have the food. You have to bring it in from outside the county. Hopefully that answers your question, but let me know if not. And then to the second question on advisory boards. So the Ag Advisory Board is not different, I would say, to other county boards, at least for Wake County. So like there are numerous other voluntary advisory boards. Like another one I'm thinking of is there's a Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Advisory Committee. They are basically the equivalent of what our board is for Parks and Rec and Open Space in Wake County. And they have the say of recommending projects to the county commissioners for approval. But that is kind of where the jurisdiction ends. So they're making recommendations to county commissioners, but it is the commissioners who make the ultimate approval. But that's only for easements. So with our voluntary agricultural district and enhanced voluntary agricultural district programs, the Ag Advisory Board has the authority, the ability to approve those in-house, and that's their program. But with easements, when funding is involved, they make the recommendation to the county commissioners, and the county commissioners have to actually approve the release of that funding. So I guess that's kind of where the limit of their power stops.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Altman is here, and it's your turn.
Thank you. How many counties in North Carolina have implemented this program? If you didn't already
So,
say.
yeah, I don't have the exact number. I will say we were not the first. We really took inspiration from Buncombe County. They have had a formal farmland preservation program for years now. They actually have 2 dedicated staff people within the Buncombe County Soil and Water Office who deal with just farmland preservation, easements, VAD, and so forth. So they're really the model that we have followed. And what I'll say is, I think from seeing what other soil and water districts across the state have done, Buncombe was really the main one that had a formal program. I mean, they had marketing, they had staff, they had funding, but a lot of other districts have done it in a piecemeal manner. So you've got a district who recognizes that they're threatened by development, and they have willing farmers who want to work on conservation easements, and they can spare a staff person to help with one application for a given farmer, but maybe they only have the capacity for one a year, if that really. So I guess what I'd say is you don't have to have the formal program to do farmland preservation activities, but it just really helps to provide the support and the resources needed to do it at the level in which we need it here in Wake County. Because there are, like I said, there are numerous districts that hold easements, and they submitted applications for funding like I am doing now, but they just didn't have a formal program for it. And they might hold 1 or 2 and they feel kind of inundated by it because they're dealing with their other day-to-day work that is not easements and farmland preservation.
Thank you. And your slide says newly allocated funding from the Wake County Board of Commissioners will allow for county funds to be leveraged. So can you give me an idea of the scope, the dollar amount of the newly allocated funding that was set aside by Wake or that was generated by the program, just so I can understand the scale?
Right. So it changes year to year. It's based on tax revenue for that given tax year. For tax year 2022, which is the only one we've received so far, it was $4.2 million. And we were expecting a little less than that. Ended up being more than we thought, which is a double-edged sword because it means that also more land came out of ag use. But we expect a similar sum for 23.
And just so again, I'm clear, there's a 3-year look back period. So you could be liable and have to repay taxes you were exempted from no more than 3 years previous to when you would cease to participate in the program. Is that right?
That's how I understand it. That's how I've been told by the tax folks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. This is Commissioner Powell.
Sure.
I'm really glad that you went over how important it is for you to have a formal farm preservation program, because I agree with you. I also want to know how critical, because in the presentations in the state conference we had, you had the Lands Conservancy there with you. How critical were they in the role of being able to do the conservation easement for the 112 acre project?
Extremely critical. I mean, it was their project and they really brought it to us mostly at the finish line. And we were able to help with the funding component. They had worked on that project for 15 years, really. I mean, nuts and bolts of it, they had probably been working through it for 5 or 6, but the idea and effort has been there for that long. But yeah, that local nonprofit conservation partner is essential. I know Triangle Land Conservancy here has been doing farmland preservation and conservation easements for decades. They have a wealth of knowledge and we have a great relationship with them. They've been willing to share, the do's and don'ts. They've been willing to share contacts and resources. So I know that they were able to help us get the program off the ground and have kind of that early success story. And then we're looking to basically be kind of on the same team, both submitting applications for easements, but basically willing to help them with projects they need funding on from the county perspective. And then, but we'll also be working on our own as well in parallel, really.
And how critical was the support from the county commissioners?
Also very, very critical. I mean, so the initial VAD ordinance back over 20 years ago had really strict terms. And it wasn't until 2016 that was approved. And it was really just because there were finally county commissioners that were kind of willing to hear the requests of Soil and Water and making it a little easier for landowners to join and become a part of the voluntary ag district program. Kind of same to be said for farmland preservation. We really had one big champion Commissioner Vicki Adamson. She's always been on our side, and she has done a lot of work to help kind of show our other commissioners how important this is, and we really have their support more than ever. We're really thankful for it, and I don't think we would be here without their support either.
I agree with you. That's why I was asking the questions, because I have her name written right on this paper. She's been such a champion, and so has the Triangle Lands Conservancy. And there's been so much perseverance, but it takes the will of the board to make these things happen. And you have to have enough people to make sure the funding is there. And it takes people like you with, perseverance and passion. And so you are my kind of people. And I love your presentation. I love the work that you're doing. The burdens on Mecklenburg are, if you think it's bad in Wake, you should come visit us, because I am very concerned about what happens to any land when there are no teeth to protect it and when there aren't layers of protection. And so even when you have a conservation easement, that's not a guarantee. You hope it's a guarantee, but there are places in the nation where they're trying to repeal conservation easements. And it's alarming. And I don't know, how anyone can have a good quality of life without protecting natural resources. So you make my heart smile. It's hard work. And I hope that we can partner with you, on lessons learned, because we have the will of the board right now to make things better for the future. And it could change next year, but we have the will of the board now. So we're going to try and do as much as we can. And are there any more questions? So thank you so much. When you fall asleep tonight, just know that there are people in the world grateful for your work. All of you. I think you might have Triangle Lands Conservancy on the call. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if they're here, but they're very happy for it too. But yeah, thank you so much. It's been great to speak with you all, and it's good to know that other folks are wanting to do it. And it seems like it's a tide that's turning a little bit in the right direction in the face of a pretty big obstacle as well. But yeah, thank you, and I'm happy to support any ongoing efforts or questions and needs that you all have in any capacity. So just let us know.
Thank you so much. And is Teresa here yet, or she didn't make it? Well, thank you for filling in for Teresa as well, and tell her thank you.
I sure
It's
will.
just a lifetime of good work. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Okay, and now we will be moving on to how the grim changes from the Supreme Court have impacted the protection of our wetlands. And so I will now recognize Don Ceccarelli, the Director of our County Stormwater, and Rusty Rozelle, Environmental Protection Manager, to share how the federal waters of the United States ruling impacts Mecklenburg County.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. So a couple of things before I get started is I probably have 5 minutes worth of acronyms. So bear with me. WOTUS, as it is shown in the presentation, is Waters of the United States. Those are the federal waters to which the Clean Water Act applies, technically. So what I want to do is I am not a Waters of the United States expert, but what I wanted to do at Commissioner Powell's request was give an overview of the history of the waters of the United States, where it came from, transformations that have gone through, and then more importantly, what impacts that we see this has for us in Mecklenburg County, and then tried to anticipate some questions that you may have, although maybe I didn't anticipate all of them. So I'll go ahead and get started. So I want to go through a brief history of the waters of the United States. It first was developed as part of the Clean Water Act in the 70s and in the 80s. It was defined by the Environmental Protection Agency and by the Army Corps of Engineers. Originally, that applied to navigable waters, which is a definition of any type of water that can be traversed via craft, boat, if you will. That was in the 1970s. In 1985, there were Supreme Court cases. I'm just going to call it the Bayview case, where they added tributaries to navigable waters to the definition of waters of the states. So these would be smaller streams that you couldn't really put a boat on, but they would feed into a stream that you could put a boat on, that flowed into those navigable waters. And then also it added a definition for, we're going to consider wetlands adjacent to tributaries and navigable waters as waters of the state. In 2001, the Solid Waste Agency of North Cook County, Illinois, that's what SWANK stands for, added, it was a court case, and that added the definition to a wetland as a wetland with a significant nexus. And the definition of a significant nexus, as you might imagine, is any type of connection or intersection, underground or surface, to a waters of the United States, to a stream or a tributary. So any type of connection, any wetland with any type of connection to hydrologic or hydraulic connection would be considered now a waters of the state in 2001. In 2009, the Rapanos decision, again, this was a Supreme Court decision, ruled that only wetlands with a continuous surface connection to waters of the United States are going to be considered waters of the United States. Okay. So if you think about a wetland, you can have a wetland, which sometimes called a pocket wetland, you might hear. It's a wetland that's out all by itself. There's no streams around it, no surface waters around it. It's just a little pocket wetland all by itself. That has, I would say that, now I'm going to preface this, I'm not a wetland scientist. Even Rusty, with 40 some years, he's not a wetland scientist. But that would be an example of a wetland that has a underground connection, because all wetlands are going to have some connection to groundwater or they wouldn't be wetlands. Okay, same thing with streams. So there's always some connection there. So in 2009, the ruling said only wetlands with a surface connection to waters. And then in 2015, it went back and said, well, we like this significant nexus definition, but it's so complicated. We're going to give you a 400 and some page guidance document to figure out how to determine what a significant nexus is. And so they expanded it to say any water that was physically, chemically, and biologically integrated with a navigable water. And just those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 adverbs, I guess they are. They're adjectives. Those words were basically explained in this 423 page document. In 2019, that decision was repealed. And so it reinstated the decision that was previous, which was prior to the 2015 decision. And then in 2023, which is the latest ruling, it's called the Sackett decision. Basically, it reinstated the 2015 rule, which stated that only wetlands that are relatively permanent, added that in there, with a continuous surface connection to waters of the state are included. And that became effective September 9th of 2023. Now, you can tell by the amount of rulings that have come out that it might be as soon as next week before the next ruling comes out. So this has happened all throughout the last the last several decades. For North Carolina, what happened in North Carolina recently was that North Carolina aligned their definition of a wetland with the waters of the United States determination that was implemented as a result of the Sackett ruling. And so what the Clean Water Act and the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA basically didn't change. What they changed was aligning the definitions with the results of the Sackett decision. And so North Carolina went ahead and aligned with that until the Environmental Management Commission issues a revised permanent rule if they should. That's what the state legislation has right now. By way of just visually showing you, this is a image. You can go on the web. There's a national wetlands inventory map, covers the entire United States, and they have, I won't say these are wetland scientist evaluated. These are evaluated from aerial photographs and imagery where folks are looking for indications of surface waters and vegetation through aerial photographs. But this will give you a good representation of what a wetland with a surface connection might look like versus one that has no surface connection. So you'll see the one up there in the upper left-hand corner has no visible stream around it. So there would be no surface connection to a surface water from that wetland. And then you'll see most all the others are located either adjacent to or right next to a identified surface water. And so those would be considered surface connections. Okay, next. So there's another map that is available. It's the North Carolina wetlands map, and I chose a few stock photos from that website for some instances of wetlands that they have here in Mecklenburg County. These are some from McDowell Creek Nature Preserve. You see on the left, that's probably what you consider a traditional wetlands, lots of water, the kind of the backwaters area of a cove. And then you'll see the picture on the left, which is also classified as a wetlands. If you take a look at the The bottom of the tree where the roots are protruding out, you see a little different color that indicates where the water typically sits on that. So that would also be considered a wetland area. Next slide. And then for Buckeye Cove Nature Preserve, here are a couple of photos of what a wetland looks like in that nature preserve. Show a little history on delineation of wetlands in Mecklenburg County. Delineation, which is what this rule affects, is how you delineate what is a water of the state. It doesn't really impact the protections for waters of the state. It delineates how we're going to delineate, how we're going to talk about what is a wetland or a waters of the state. And so in Mecklenburg County, that has always been done by the Army Corps of Engineers. And will continue to be done into the future. The Army Corps of Engineers will issue a Section 404 permit, okay, for a wetland. If someone wants to disturb a wetland, they have to get a permit through the Army Corps to do that. And also the state, North Carolina DEQ, or Department of Environmental Quality, they also have to issue what's called a water quality certification after that permit is issued, which says we believe that this disturbance does not cause significant harm to the environment. They have to issue that statement. And so those are the two bodies that have historically regulated and delineated wetlands in Mecklenburg County and in the entire state, as far as I know. The Army Corps also has what they call general permits that allow folks to disturb and remove wetlands if it's under a certain threshold. So that has been in effect since day one. So to give you an example, if someone wants to put in a road across a stream, there is a wetlands permit that is a general permit that as long as you don't make your road wider than X, you don't have to, as long as you comply with that permit, you don't have to notify, you can go ahead and to make that disturbance because it's part of this national wetlands permit. So I think, put me on this, there might be 20 to 30 of those general permits that already allow for those types of disturbances and wetlands to occur. And originally I thought that there were no ordinances in Mecklenburg County that are impacted by the presence or absence of wetlands, but after doing some research, there are two. In Huntersville has an ordinance, that we probably have 6 or 7 different buffer types in Mecklenburg County. And in Huntersville, one of their buffer types indicates it's a buffer from a surface water, and they have elected to say that a permitted wetland is a surface water, and they are buffering those wetlands with the same buffers that are on our streams. In the second instance, and this is only during the erosion control or during the construction phase, the enhanced erosion controls in Mecklenburg County, which we have in place for sensitive waters. You can see it there in our water supplies and watershed areas, the entire town of Matthews, anywhere within a certain distance of an impaired stream in the Goose Creek watershed. We also require during construction a 10-foot buffer, basically putting silt fence around those permitted wetlands during the construction phase. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I'm going to anticipate some questions, and then I'll open it up for you to ask yours. So does this ruling eliminate all wetlands from being regulated? It does not. What it will do is when those wetlands are delineated. So what happens whether it's a county project or whether it's a private project is before you do any development, you hire a wetland scientist to go out in the field, delineate the wetlands. They put together an application for you. If you need one, you send it to the Army Corps. The Army Corps issues the permit and the state issues their water quality certification if they agree with your application. And so what this new ruling will do is that previously wetlands with underground connections would have been listed as wetlands and been subject to those federal protections. Now, those will not be considered wetlands when the wetland scientist goes out to do their survey. So the wetlands with a surface connection will still be protected in the same manner that they were before. Will it eliminate the protection of wetlands? There'll be no difference in the protection. There'll just be a limit on what is. There will be no limit on what's considered a wetland now. It will be only those with surface connections. It will be limited to wetlands that have that. Will the ruling increase flooding because more wetlands can be filled in? I've heard that from a few folks. I can tell you that the flooding, if you look at flooding in terms of floodplains, we always talk about 100-year storm event. If we have 100-year storm event, the capacity of a wetland or even some of our treatment wet ponds aren't going to matter because they're only designed for a 50-year storm. So when we have a 100-year storm, it's going to have no impact on flooding. What it will do is wetlands do allow absorption of water into the groundwater. So there's a reduction under normal flows. And so if there are those pocket wetlands that would have allowed that introduction of water into the groundwater versus flowing into the streams, those will be eliminated. I don't think those are going to have any impact on our floodplains and our 100-year floodplains. Because even when we look at those now, when we have designed wet ponds, we don't even consider the impacts of those when we look at our floodplain and our floodplain mapping. It just, when you have that much rain, it just doesn't have an impact on the conditions in the stream. Will the ruling reduce the number of wetlands regulated? Yes, it will indeed. And will that reduce water quality treatment of stormwater? So a natural wetland, whether it's connected or not connected, does provide treatment of stormwater by the fact that it has vegetation in it and by the fact that it allows some absorption down into the groundwater. I will say that if for development, you know, we spent, well, I should say, Rusty spent 18 months coming up with our post-construction ordinance so that if there is development, most of that, if not all of that development, is going to require an engineered stormwater treatment structure for water quality as well as water quantity. Okay, so will it reduce water quality treatment of the natural flows? Yes, but if that property is being redeveloped, there's a very high probability that that runoff is going to have to be treated by a man-made treatment structure, which we even have wetlands as one of our man-made treatment structures. So I think, is that it? So I know that was a lot of information, very quick. I'll I'll just entertain any questions for myself or Rusty.
Did you want to add anything, Rusty, before we ask questions? Okay.
Great job, Don.
Well, when, because I was there for a lot of the post-construction meetings when you were there, and it was tense. Remember that?
Oh.
It was very tense. And so it's like you had to come up with kind of a, I don't even know what to call it. It wasn't exactly what stormwater would want, but it also wasn't exactly, it was
Consensus.
well, consensus kind of, but more like a compromise, but the best we could do. And I didn't know if you wanted to add to that. So who wants to go first? Commissioner Altman?
I'll just say that it's always appreciated when I can get an opportunity to be educated about something that's very important to us, relevant to our work, and complicated, not easily accessible. So thank you for the exposure and to the information as I absorb it and try to like twirl it around in my brain and be able to spit it back out again. Are there any particular points of leverage or action or nuance that as county commissioners, when we go vote, you would want us to be sure we were crystal clear on?
I would just say that right now, you know, one of the, let me start with one of the questions I should have asked was, well, what percent of the wetlands in Mecklenburg County are going to be impacted? Well, we don't know. We don't know the impacts of it yet. And until the next guidance document comes out, we're not really going to know the extent of how they're going to define continuous surface connection and relatively permanent.
So just again, what is your single biggest concern that we should be taking away?
Or maybe a better way to say it, so you don't feel so under the thumb, is what are the hardest challenges? What are the challenges with the changes?
For us locally, I don't think there are going to be any challenges for the ordinances that we're currently implementing, because they don't really rely on the existence or absence of a wetland. Now, what should we be concerned about? We should be concerned about, well, is it going to have an impact on water quality? That would be our biggest concern, and for us to know whether it's going to have an impact on water quality is going to be hard for us to know right now.
Yeah, and I think the one benefit that we have here in Mecklenburg County is that we have some good stream buffer ordinances. So we're protecting the land adjacent to our streams. And I think as far as I'm concerned, I think protecting those rules is paramount. A lot of the wetlands, it's impossible to know, like Don said, how many wetlands do we have in Mecklenburg County that are true pocket wetlands and are not connected to a stream or other water body, and we just simply don't know that. I would think that I won't use the word rare, but I think for the most part, most of our acres of wetlands are connected to a surface water, the waters of the U.S. And here in the last 20 years, we've had a significant increase in the number of acres of wetlands due to our beaver populations. They have done a very good job of increasing our wetland acres, which is good. And all of those will be connected. So they will continue to be regulated. And locally, we don't have a lot of control. A lot of those regulations are set at the state level and the federal level. But we do have control over those stream buffers. And I think as long as we keep those, we'll be in good shape.
Thank you. You don't have any questions? Commissioner Giroux?
Way to anticipate the questions. So I'm good. Thank you.
These are the questions I anticipated. So no more questions except for me. And I don't know who has seen this, but I've heard about it. It's grim, like every stream is impaired. So every stream's impaired, and our wetlands are so important in filtering the groundwater recharge and the filtration and all the things that our wetlands do, not just our wetlands, but even just things that aren't impervious. I feel like there's more challenges, and I feel like we're going to learn it the hard way. Like what happens when you try and alter the natural course of things to an extreme, to where, less than 10% of the land is protected, and now the wetlands that don't have the continuous water. And so I thank you for the presentation. It's just, like I said before, while there's a strong will to protect the environment on this board, how do we do better, like locally, when we have obstacles like this? What can we do? And you're the experts. And so, if there's a way that we can do better, we want to. I keep hearing about buffers that were by mistake mowed over, cut down by mistake. Like, if we need to increase the penalties, we need to be part of that. Like, it can't just be like, oh, part of doing business, cutting down the buffers. So I think that's just, the energy of like, we want to make a difference. We need the experts to help us. And it's extreme here. I mean, they're altering how natural systems work. So is there anything else? I'm stuck in these two topics. We have to protect our everything, our streams, our farmland, our nature preserves. All right, well, if there's nothing else on the agenda, and
Move to
there's
adjourn.
nothing else except gratitude for everyone involved that does good work. We appreciate you. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.
Commissioner Durrell, Eastland.
The meeting is adjourned at 1:56. It's a miracle.
Mhm.